There are pros and cons to every short-term rental platform and specific methods or tactics that you can use with each of them. But I specifically like to use this method because of a few specific reasons that we'll be talking about today. Now, it goes without saying, but there are already a few major players for short-term rental platforms. So we're going to go over some of them to give you a little bit more context if you're unfamiliar with any of them. By now, we've all probably heard of Airbnb. A slightly smaller group of us are probably familiar with platforms like Vrbo or HomeAway. The reason why we've heard about them is because they afford hosts a huge market of potential guest renters. While making the setup process for hosts a fairly streamlined experience, they spend a ton on marketing, making it easier for hosts to attract stays, and usually pretty quickly. But there's some key factors to take into consideration when choosing a main short-term rental platform. One huge factor in picking a short-term rental platform is market share. Let's face it, Airbnb is a marketing monster. No, literally, they have big sharp teeth and everything. They've got access to literally millions of users or customers. But that many customers, they are hard to beat when it comes to marketing. For us, we go the extra mile and include a few specific things in our listings to attract more guests and target a specific guest demographic. One thing we always include in our listings is a welcome basket. A welcome basket is an excellent way to greet your guests with a pleasant surprise. Simple things like a bottle of water, a handwritten note, or even a piece of candy go a long way with guests. These small gestures help enhance their experiences with you and your property. The best part is that these small items don't really cost a lot at all. Now, as great as all these platforms are, there are also some drawbacks to all of them that you need to keep in mind when putting your rentals on them. With every great list of pros comes at least a few cons. The problem with dealing with big box heavy hitters in the short-term rental game comes down to the details. For example, if you come across a tough situation or maybe need the answer to a very specific question, you might find yourself sending at least a few emails or spending a bit of time on the phone with the platform trying to get the help that you need. It's not personal, it's just that these platforms support so many customers, guests and hosts, that make the task of providing one-on-one support a huge one. Also, be ready for intermittent changes and updates. Now, don't get me wrong, change is often good and healthy, but sometimes it literally sucks. Big hosting companies have to make changes that best serve the mass majority of their customers. These changes might not always align seamlessly with your business model. Fee structure, cancellation policies, and even the way that guests are protected. All of these changes impact day-to-day work. In dealing with a big company, the only thing you can do is really comply. You also have to consider things that might impact your profitability, like booking fees, commissions, and payment structures. Fees literally suck. The truth of the matter is that if you're in business, you're going to pay fees somehow and in some way, especially if you're utilizing a booking platform. Most booking platforms charge a service fee, which is calculated as a percentage against each booking. These fees cover support for yourself and guests, as well as other platform perks like payment handling, marketing, etc. Now, depending on how your business is set up and where you operate, the fees may vary significantly. In some instances, the city may also charge their own fees, right? This is why it's imperative to understand your local laws and rental ordinances before you begin operating. Understanding fees is a critical part of ensuring that your business model is a profitable one. Other things that can impact hosts are the different ways that each short-term rental platform handles issues, such as cancellations, disputes, and property damage. Now, in general, most larger hosting platforms do a good job in providing protections during a guest stay. These protections provide hosts with peace of mind that their biggest asset, their property, is protected in the case of accidental damage caused by a guest. It's important to understand the limitations of these protection plans so that you are well positioned in case something goes wrong. One bit of caution is that these protection products are not home insurance and should be relied on as such. Considering cancellations, as a host, you have options to choose the cancellation policy that best fits your listing or your business model. For example, You can choose a strict policy, which might require guests to pay a hefty fee for last-minute cancellations. Or you might choose a less strict policy, one that is more forgiving for last-minute changes or adjustments. The cancellation policy you choose also should be a strategic choice. For example, a strict policy might ensure that you get paid for last-minute cancellations. However, it might also deter potential guests who might be looking for more flexibility from booking with you. If you couldn't tell so far, there are a lot of things to keep in mind when listing your short-term rentals because of the ways that every step is handled. You can't always predict what will happen on each platform, but what you can do is hedge your bets by staying up to date on everything related to short-term rentals, which you can do by subscribing. So there's literally pros and cons of every listing software, meaning it's probably a good idea to mitigate risk by putting your short-term rental on as many of them as you can. However, in doing so, you're going to want to make sure that you avoid mistakes like the dreaded double bookings. There really isn't a worse feeling than having a single property booked by 2 different guests for the same period of time. It's a silly problem to run into and creates a horrible guest and host experience. The best thing about this issue is that it's super easy to prevent. Make sure that the calendars for your listings are synced across each rental platform. In many cases, all it takes is just pasting a listing calendar link from one platform into the other, and vice versa. Another thing to keep in mind when you're putting your property on these platforms is that they're going to be seen by multiple different audiences. Do yourself a favor and first make the listing the best it can be. This means highlighting key features of the property with plenty of professional photos. Sorry guys, the mobile phone pictures will not cut it. Go a step further and include great shots of some local favorites or community attractions. Maybe there's some restaurants that you like, some parks nearby, or some museums. Capture those photos. Include sufficient details about the property, noting any quirks, unique features, or even key amenities. Talk about the neighborhood and things to do in the listing description as well. You are selling the property and the experience being offered, regardless of the platform you're posting it to. So I know we've gone over a lot in this video so far, but if I could get you to listen to at least one part of the video, then it would be this one, to make sure you're following the best practices of putting your property on multiple platforms. Pay attention to the details because they freaking matter. Honestly, simple inconsistencies like varied cancellation policies across listings and platforms, poor communication, or even an incomplete listing description can cause both guests and host confusion. These inconsistencies inevitably all lead back to the experience, which is what we want to ensure is always a positive one. Getting your rental seen by more people doesn't have to be difficult, but one thing that can be incredibly intimidating is actually getting started. What I did to get started is I built a tiny Airbnb with really low costs, really high profits, and not a lot of commitment because of the way it was built. This is how I got started in Airbnb because it took off like a rocket, and it made the process of getting started a whole lot easier. So if you're someone who's struggling with taking the first step, a tiny Airbnb is a great way to start. And if you want to learn how I did it and avoid the mistakes that most people make, then watch this video here.